I record this? Uh-oh. Oh, uh-oh.
What's that? There we go.
Is that your screen, Chris?
Okay.
Yes, that's on purpose. He's starting out with geography.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know how to get me on the face because it's not my computer. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll be quiet and listen and
Well,
watch.
let me just say this. When you guys are talking to each other, mute, although because we can hear absolutely everything. When you eat a pizza, we can hear you eat a pizza. We can hear you open a door, talk to your dog. So, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give you a series of 4 separate lectures. 2 of them are going to be on Italian Renaissance, and 2 of them are going to be on German art. So I'm going to start with the early Italian Renaissance, which means roughly it's a period between the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the proper Renaissance. So the artwork I'm going to first show you is roughly from 1280 to 1400. And the next lecture, you're going to see the early stages of the Renaissance. The next lectures, you will see all the great ones, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Titian, Caravaggio, and so forth. I must warn you that a lot of the artwork is highly religious, because this is Italy and these are the Middle Ages. So it was very rare for an artist to work on a secular pieces. 99% of the work was commissioned and 99% of the work was religious. What you're looking at is a 3D map of Italy, and you can see the Alps above it. So the early art of the Italian Renaissance was greatly influenced by Byzantine art and Gothic art. Byzantine art concerned the Eastern Roman Empire, which had separated from the Western Roman Empire. And the Renaissance is also influenced by Gothic art, which comes from Northern Europe. Let me admit somebody. Whoop. There, sorry about that. This is a map of Italy in the 14th century. So Italy as a country did not exist. It was simply a mosaic of different city-states. So there was Venice, there was Florence, there's Genoa, Siena, and Naples. So the independent city-state, and of course you can add the papal state of the Pope and Rome. So, all these Italian Republic became very wealthy because of the maritime transport all over the Mediterranean Sea. So Italy was not a unified country until the beginning of the 19th century. So you're looking at mostly Florence, which was the most famous of all of them. This is a map of Rome. This is made in 1640 by a Swiss engraver. His name was Matthäus Merian. He was born in 1593. So you can see it's not the best resolution, but it is his map of Rome, and you can see the Tiber River in the front. This one is rather extraordinary. This is a map of Florence. It's a woodcut. It's an engraving of Florence. It was made in the 14th century. It's made by a German artist called Hartmann Scheckel. He was an historian. He was a physician. He was also a cartographer. And in the center of that piece, you can see the Cathedral Maria del Fiore. That cathedral was built in 1298. So this gentleman, Hartmann, scheduled that the one that created this print now started to sell. It came in the form of a book because this was 50 years after the invention of the Gutenberg press. So now books were not made for just one person; they were made for hundreds of thousands of people. And the last map I will show you is this one. This is a map of Genoa from the 15th century. It's in the Nuremberg German Chronicle. It was made in 1493. So a year after Columbus landed in the West Indies. The first artist I'm going to talk about is going to be Paolo Uccello. Paolo Uccello, this is what you're looking at is a tempera painting on panel. For those who don't know what tempera is, when you use acrylic, you use pigment with water. When you use oil painting, you use pigment with oil. And when you use tempera, you use egg yolk with pigment. So this is a tempera panel. It's at the Louvre Museum. It's the only portrait we have of Uccello. His name was actually Paolo di Dono. He was a painter and a mathematician, and he was born in 1397 in the town of Prato Vecchio near Florence. And he was nicknamed Uccello, which means bird in Italian, for his fondness to draw birds. The first painting I will show you of his, this is St. George and the Dragon. It's painted in 1470. It's an oil and canvas. It's at the National Gallery in London. So the legend of St. George and the Dragon is the tale of St. George. He died in 303. Here he's taming and he's slaying a dragon because the dragon was demanding a human sacrifice. So seen here through medieval eyes, George the Saint is spearing the beast. You guys make a lot of noise in the background. Can you be careful of that? He's spearing the beast, and on the left, the princess is using her belt as a leash to take the dragon back to town. So this is the first painting of Uccello. And as I told you, he was nicknamed Uccello the bird because of his fondness. He drew a lot of birds. So this is a detail of the fresco that he painted in 1463. So long, long time ago. He was fascinated by perspective. Linda, is that you making all that noise?
I'm sorry.
This is a perspective of a vase, so this is good for you, Cynthia. You know, perspective was something very new at the time. Before, the images were very flat and they had no depth. So this is an extraordinary drawing of a vase. And all his life, Uccello was obsessed by visual perspective. And he also drew this one. This is a diamond sphere. It measures 8 inches by 10. It's made with ink and brown watch. This is at the Louvre Museum. So Uccello stayed up all night trying to grasp the exact vanishing point in perspective. And he joined the Guild of Florence Painters in 1414. And one of his patrons was the famous house of Medici. So when you were backed up by the Medici, you had it made. This is Hunt in the Forest, and that painting measures 65 inches. It's at the Oxford University of England, and it's one of his most famous work. Everything that you see, you know, the tree, the horses, the people, everything is vanishing toward the horizon and a vanishing point. So this is a very new technique. You can see how everything is receding toward a center point. And this painting is also unusual because it is not a religious painting. This is a painting by Uccello. It's actually a fresco. It's a funerary monument. This fresco measures 24 feet high. It's a funerary monument to a gentleman called Sir John Hawkwood. And Uccello was commissioned to paint this fresco to commemorate John Hawkwood. John Hawkwood was a soldier of fortune, if you will. He fought for the English during the 100 Years' War with France, but he became commander of the Florence military. So this equestrian monument shows his interest in perspective because you can see the view is seen from below. One thing we know is that fighting a war on behalf of the Papal State, John Hawkwood received 130,000 florin to fight a war. And if you don't know what a florin is, this is a florin, a gold florin from the 15th century. Don't you guys miss the era where you had gold coins in your pocket as opposed to a plastic card? So I'm going to show you a series of 3 panels. This is commemorating the Battle of San Romano. The Battle of San Romano is a set of 3 paintings, and they depict events that took place at the Battle of San Romano between the forces of Florence against the forces of Siena. Siena is another city-state, and the battle happened in 1432. So this is egg tempera on a wooden panel. Each panel measures about 15 feet long. So this is one of them. And all these panels were painted for the Medici Palace in Florence. So this is egg tempera on a wooden panel that are about almost 15 feet.
And there's the oranges in the upper left. Medici's always had oranges painted into the paintings they funded.
Is that true?
Yeah, they were. It was a great sign at the time.
Yeah. And this is the 3rd panel. So you can see a very unusual way of painting, very unique. So this one needs some explanation. This is called Corpus Domini Predella. It's the miracle of the desecrated host. So it's a great panel, but I'm going to take you through the meaning of this panel. This was a long time ago, so you have to place things within the context. This is called the host desecration. The host desecration for Christian is a form of sacrilege. You know, the host is a little white circle that signify the body of Christ. So to desecrate the body of Christ is a mortal sin that can lead to excommunication. So here a woman comes, sees a Jewish merchant, and she's trying to sell the body of Christ, that little piece of white bread. She's trying to sell it for money to a Jewish merchant. In panel 2, the Jew tried to burn the host, but it starts to bleed and it alerts the gods. And in this one, a procession is organized to reconsecrate the host. And in this one, despite repenting, the woman that just sold the host is hanged at the tree as an angel descends from heaven to save her soul. You may wonder why the angel did not show up earlier. And in this panel, the Jew, because he desecrated the host, he's burned at the stake. And in this one, the 2 angels and the 2 devils are arguing over the woman's body. See, this tells you, it gives you an idea where people were. The life and customs were dominated by Christianity. So it was fairly dark, and people believed in all those things. This is a great painting by Uccello. This is called the Thebaid. It measures 43 inches wide, and it's a tempera on canvas. Thebaid was a region of ancient Egypt, and the painting tells the life of saints and monks, and it shows different scenes of monastic life. So it was painted for the San Giorgio alla Costa Monastery near Florence. And so the Thebaid, the theme of the Thebaid is a fairly common one. I'm going to show you the same painting by a different artist. This artist is Fra Angelico, a very famous Italian painter. Fra Angelico was born Guido di Pietro in Tuscany in 1395. He was a monk, so Fra Angelico means angelic brother. So this painting measures 81 inches. It's at the Museum of Fine Art in Budapest. So Fra Angelico was summoned by the Pope to Rome to paint the frescoes of the St. Peter Cathedral. And the famous and wealthy Medici family became his patron. In 1982, he was beatified. He became a saint. The Pope John II declared him a saint. Truthfully, I'm more likely to be excommunicated than to become a saint myself. But there's a lot of politics. So a lot of people just became saints, whether they deserved it or not. Anyway, this is Fra Angelico. This is a if I can find it. This is a posthumous portrait of Fra Angelico. It was painted in the 15th century. So you have a little bit of an idea what it looked like. This is the one of the painting he did of the Annunciation. It's a 10 feet wide painting. It's a fresco. So a fresco is when you mix pigment directly to the plaster. So it becomes part of the wall. So it's a little bit inconvenient because if you want to remove the piece, you have to remove the entire wall. And he did this other version of the Annunciation. Isn't that beautiful? This is tempera, egg yolk tempera on panel. It's at the Museum del Prado in Madrid. And that painting measures 75 inches wide. And I'm going to show you two details of this painting. You see how softly painted it is. It's absolutely beautiful. So when you look at a lot of religious painting, a lot of us are not religious, certainly not to the degree people were in the Middle Ages. But what you have to realize is that, you know, artists did not have a choice, but you can still appreciate the beauty of the painting. And these were made 600 years ago. So this is a detail, and I have this other detail that is just beautiful. The colors are absolutely gorgeous, and you can see that they extensively use gold foil to add the tint of color to the painting.
Gold leaf.
Gold leaf, correct. This is called Madonna of Humility. It's in another tempera on panel that measures 20 inches. It's at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. This one is an altarpiece. It's at the Museum of San Marco in Florence. It measures 73 inches wide, and it portrays Christ supported by several people, including Mary Magdalene, who is kissing his feet as a symbol of human repentance. So these are incredible colors for the time. They're accented with gold and a lot of complex woodworking. So for an artist to be able to use such rich color, which include lapis lazuli, you had to be pretty well known to be able to tell your patron that you needed to buy such colors. I'm going to show you a few details of this painting because the faces are absolutely beautiful. The next artist is Ambrogio Lorenzetti. This is the only portrait. It's not much of a portrait. He was an Italian painter. He was born in 1290 in the Republic of Siena, and he had a very unique and individualistic way of painting, as you will see. And one of the things about this painting I'm going to show you is they are secular. They're not religious, so they're unusual. This is called the Allegory of Good and Bad Government. The allegory of good and bad government was commissioned by the Siena City Council. Unlike most of the time, the subject matter is civic rather than religious. So it's a series of 6 fresco panels to decorate the public palace in Siena. It was painted in 1338, and it was painted for the 9 magistrates of the Republic of Siena. So it was to remind these magistrates what was at stake with the decision, such as tyranny, citizenship, justice, and peace. So it's all over the wall of what was the city council to remind the magistrate to ask fairly and wisely. And I'll show you a few details because the details are really quite beautiful. Isn't that pretty? Pax means peace at the top in Latin. And this one is temperance. It's not only very beautiful, but it is the first time in art history that you see a depiction of the hourglass. And this is not the best resolution, but I love this painting. This is City by the Sea. It's a rendering of the city-state of Siena. It's an oil on canvas that was painted in 1348. So the painter here, Ambrogio Lorenzetti, is believed to have died from the Black Plague in 1348, as well as his brother. And this is same artist, Ambrogio Lorenzetti. This is another Annunciation. This one is egg tempera on panel. It measures 50 inches tall, and you can see the extensive use of gold foil. And it's one thing to see this painting, the image on a computer, but if you actually saw this painting in person, you would understand even more, why these pieces are considered masterpieces. This is another painting of Ambrogio, and the reason I'm showing you this painting because it is the first time you can see the depiction of eyeglasses in art history. So you can see this monk wearing eyeglasses. The next artist is Taddeo Gaddi. Taddeo Gaddi was another grain painter of the early Italian Renaissance. He was a medieval painter. He was also an architect, and he was born in Florence in 1290. He was a member of Giotto workshop. Giotto is a very famous Italian artist, and Taddeo was considered his most talented pupil. So what Taddeo did, he painted a lot of frescoes. He painted frescoes for the Baroncelli Chapel, which is within the Basilica of San Croce in fresco. So he painted this it took him 10 years from 1328 to 1338 to paint frescoes. And I'll show you a few of these frescoes because they go all the way to the ceiling. So imagine what it is for an artist to be commissioned to paint a church with a team of other artists and have this painting reach all the way to the ceiling of the church. This is the Basilica of San Croce in Florence. I thought you'd want to see that. And this one is an altarpiece that measures about 10 feet. It's an altarpiece for the Church of Saint Felicita in Florence. So you can see extensive use of gold foil again. So this was Taddeo Gaddi. His son is Agnolo Gaddi. So again, I'm showing you images of the very early Renaissance, 1300, 1400. So we're not yet to the great masters that you will see next week. So this is Agnolio Gaddi. He was born in Florence in 1350 and he died at 46 years old. So he was a pupil of Giotto also, like his dad. Yeah. So this is the church, the Legend of the True Cross at the Chancel Chapel at the same cathedral. So his father painted the fresco in the Barocelli Chapel, but his son painted the frescoes in the Chancel Chapel. So two different chapels within the same cathedral. And again, these cover every wall in the cathedral. So the legend of the True Cross, the legend is that the cross was made at the urging of angels, and the tree itself was made from the seeds of the apple tree in the Garden of Eden. And they had planted this tree to commemorate the burial of Adam. So here's the Bible story. The cross is made from a wood that came from the Garden of Eden. So these are frescoes, right? This is where you mix pigment directly with the plaster. So it's certainly not an easy technique to achieve, certainly not when you have this level of details. One thing that is interesting is you can see how people in Florence were dressed. I mean, mostly like wealthy merchants, but you get an idea people were dressed roughly in 1370, so long time ago. This is a detail that I found absolutely beautiful. I'm sure it has faded a bit, but it is exquisite. So again, artists did not have much of a choice. What they could only work on pieces that were commissioned. They would get in big trouble if they painted for, let's say, a landscape or something like that. This is a painting, same artist, and this is Saint Nicholas saves a boat from floundering in the sea. This is a fresco. It's Madonna and Child enthroned with 12 angels. It's a tempera and poplar panel. This is at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, and it measures 80 inches. So it's an altarpiece for a church. So I told you about Giotto. Giotto is probably the most famous Italian artist of the early Renaissance. Whoop. There he is. This is Giotto. It's a statue of Giotto. Giotto was born in 1267 near Florence. He was a painter and he was an architect. And he was, as a child, he kept sheep and he was very intelligent. And the famous Italian painter Cinabiu, found him when he was keeping his sheep, and he saw him drawing animals, and they were so lifelike that he approached Giotto and he asked him if he could take him as an apprentice. So that's how he started his career. This is called a Badia polyptych. A polyptych means 3 different panels. So these panels were made for a church. And so they're 3 separate panels with hinges, so they could be folded and carried to another church or another place of worship. So Giotto worked in Florence and Rome, and he received many multiple commissions. This is the Coronation of the Virgin. It's painted in 1334. It's a tempera on wood. It's at the Basilica de San Croce. So like the two previous artists, Giotto also created fresco for the same church. And these artists spent, almost their entire life working on one commission, the commission to decorate a church. This is painted in 1297. This is Madonna and Child, and it's more striking because of her red dress. This is the Barocelli Polyptych. So again, 3 different panels. This measures 10 feet wide, and it's a tempera on wood panel. These I'm showing you details of the fresco he did for the Basilica, and this is the Legend of St. Francis. That little detail measures 11 feet tall. So these paintings are all over the wall of the church. The canvas did not exist then, so painting were made on wood panel, or they were painted directly on wall. This is the Basilica of Francesco. This is where all these separate paintings are. So you can see they painted all the way to the ceiling. And I'll show you this one. So, this is the last work of Giotto. It's considered to be his masterwork. He did the fresco with his team for the Scrovegni Chapel in Padua, and he was commissioned by a banker. So he spent 20 to 30 years painting this church. So the walls and ceiling are covered with 37 separate scenes describing the life of Christ. And this is the detail of the ceiling. A very different artist. This is Pietro Torrigiano. And this is the bust of a Florentine merchant. It's made in 1510. So Pietro Torrigiano was an Italian sculptor. He was born in Florence in 1472, but he had to flee because he broke Michelangelo's nose. And he had a very bad temper, and he died in prison in Spain. So he wrote the following about this little fight he had with Michelangelo. He wrote, Michelangelo and I used to go to church when we were boys to learn drawing from the chapel. It was Michelangelo habit to brag, and one day when he was annoying me, I got more angry than usual, and I clenched my fist and I gave him such a blow on the nose that I felt bone and cartilage go down like a biscuit beneath my knuckles. And this mark of mine he will carry with him to the grave. So he punched Michelangelo's nose. This is a remarkable bust, very lifelike. And this is another bust that he did. This is a bust of John Fisher. He was the English Bishop of Rochester. And actually, this is for you, Mary Jane. The Bishop of Rochester, John Fisher, was a confessor to Henry VIII's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Those are absolutely amazing sculptures. And here's another sculpture by a different artist. This is Andrea del Verrocchio. He was born in 1435, and he had quite an important workshop in Florence. So we know that he started as a goldsmith, but little else is known. But his patron was Lorenzo di Medici. Lorenzo di Medici, he was a family of brilliant, wealthy bankers who also ruled the city of Florence in the early Renaissance. So it is believed that this haunting likeness of Lorenzo de Medici has been molded from his death mask. This is the bust of Christ by Andrea del Verrocchio. It's at Yale University. It's another sculpture. And the last sculpture of his is this gigantic sculpture. This is very huge sculpture that measures about 20 feet high. It's a sculpture of Bartolomeo Colleoni. He was a ruler of the Republic of Venice. And it is believed to be the last work of Verrocchio. And this is a painting of Verrocchio called Madonna di Piazza. It's at the Pistoia Cathedral in Tuscany. It's a tempera painting on a wood panel. It's very large. It measures 75 inches by 75 inches. Look at the details of the carpet.
And the oranges.
Oh, you're right. More oranges. I did not know that, but now you mention that, I can see that. The next artist is Lorenzo di Credi. Lorenzo di Credi was born in Florence in 1448. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, and he worked in Verrocchio workshop. Verrocchio is the artist we just saw, and the studio of Verrocchio was left to him after the death of Verrocchio. But his work greatly influenced Leonardo da Vinci. So this is a portrait of him, Lorenzo di Credi, by another artist called Pietro Perugino. This is at the Gallery of Art in Washington. And it is unusual because it is, it's not idealized, it's fairly realistic. And again, it's not religious. This is a portrait of a young woman by Lorenzo di Credi. It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this painting measures 23 inches tall. The painting is damaged, but it is believed that this woman that is represented is the widow of the artist's brother. And this would explain why she's dressed in black and she's holding a ring in her left hand. And the last painting of Di Credi is this painting. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but I can see the influence of Flemish painter in it. It's absolutely beautifully painted. Look at the folds and the color. You can see going from early Renaissance, now the painters, it's starting to feel like the real Renaissance. There's a progress in time. So this is painted in 1423. So we're getting to the great artist of the Renaissance. This one is certainly my favorite painting. This is Giovanni Bellini. It's a portrait of the Doge. The Doge was the ruler of the city-state of Venice. So it's a portrait of the ruler, Leonardo Loredan. It's an oil panel that measures 24 inches. It is at the National Gallery in London on Trafalgar Square. Isn't that amazing? You can see how we're moving from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, the realism of the face and the colors. It's quite a remarkable painting. So Giovanni Bellini is a very famous Florentine artist born in 1430, and the famous Italian painter Titian was a pupil of Bellini. This is the Transfiguration of Christ. It's an oil on panel measuring 45 inches. And the following painting is also one of my favorite because it is absolutely remarkable in my mind. The depth, the execution. This is St. Francis in the desert. It's an oil, it's oil and tempera on a wood panel. It's quite impressive, the scale of it, the landscape. So that's the father, Giovanni Bellini. Now he had a son, and his son is Gentili Bellini. This is the Miracle of the Cross at the Bridge of St. Lorenzo. It's an oil on canvas, and it was painted in exactly 1500. And Giovanni Gentili Bellini was born in 1429 in Venice. This unusual painting, and you can probably see that the painting has been damaged at some point. This is a portrait of a lady called Akaterini Cornaro. She was the last queen of the Kingdom of Cyprus, and she was also queen of Jerusalem and Armenia. This is at the Museum of Fine Art of Budapest. I only have one painting of this artist. The artist is Antonio da Fabriano. And I find this painting absolutely beautiful, the detail. And the animal that you see on the ground is actually a lion, because Saint Jerome, I think lions used to lay at his feet. So that's the symbolism. And this was painted in 1451, as you can see in the painting. But it is very interesting to see the details of what they used to write and things like that. This artist is Gentili da Fabriano. He was born in 1370, and he was quite an influential painter in Florence. The thing about this painting, which is the coronation of the Virgin and Jesus, it reminds me of the case of Gustav Klimt. I hope you know what I mean, because you don't see so much detail, but you see the pattern of the clothing with extensive gold foil. So I just have one painting of this artist, a different artist. We don't know his name. This is Master of the Osservanza Triptych. So we don't know his name, but we know that he created this three painting that I'm showing you. And I find them highly unusual, and they look much more recent than the 1400 or something. They actually painted in 1434. They look a lot more recent. And these three paintings at the Metropolitan Art Museum. You can see that perspective was not his thing. And this is a meeting of St. Anthony of St. Paul. You can see the lack of perspective. Is that a centaur, that figure with a goat feet at the top of the image? This is an artist called Antonello de Messina. And these are really remarkable portraits, and they're definitely influenced by Flemish painter like Van Eyck. So this is Portrait of a Man. It's an oil on a poplar wood. It's a type of wood. It's at the National Gallery in London. It measures 14 inches. And it looks very simple and minimalist, but it is very difficult to give a person an expression like this. So it's very unique. It's quite a progress in portrait painting. And he also painted this one that I also find remarkable because it's quite whimsical and striking. This is a portrait of a man. It's painted in 1476. And that painting is only 15 inches high. And this one, same artist, Antonella de Messina. This is a really amazing painting of Saint Jerome in his study. It's an oil on lime wood. It's at the National Gallery in London. And you can appreciate all the details in these paintings and the depth. This is an artist called Domenico Ghirlandaio, and this is a self-portrait that he made. He was born in Florence in 1448. He was a very, very popular painter. He received a lot of very large commission, and many people worked in Ghirlandaio workshop, and that includes Michelangelo, who you'll see in the next lecture. Michelangelo was the pupil of this artist called Ghirlandaio. This is an old man and his grandson. This is at the Louvre in Paris. It's tempera on wood panel, and it's very unusual because you know, in the Middle Ages, portrait of people were very idealized, and here they're shown just as they are, without trying to be embellished. The very famous painting is 24 inches tall, and this is a painting of a lady called Giovanna Tonabuoni, and it's painted in 1489. It's a tempera and oil panel. It was commissioned by her husband, Lorenzo Tonabuoni, after she died. And the painting includes a lot of symbolic details. We've lost the context, but he had this painting created in the memory of his wife that died. This one is my favorite. It's a portrait of a young woman. So this is Domenico Ghirlandaio. So it's a portrait of a young woman. It's a tempera on a wood panel, and it measures 17 inches. The color is absolutely magnificent. And the last artist for this lecture, I'm going to show you, and you're going to now see the beginning of the true Renaissance, but I had to put you through some of the painting of the Middle Ages before we hit the Renaissance. So early Renaissance, this is Sandro Botticelli. I'm sure you've heard of Botticelli. His name is actually a nickname which means little barrel. And this artist studied under a very famous Italian artist that we will see next week called Filippo Lippi.
Yeah.
This is The Birth of Venus. It's a tempera on canvas. So canvas is starting to make its appearance, and it depicts the goddess Venus having emerged from the sea as a fully grown woman, and she was arriving on seashore. So the seashell stands as a symbol in classical antiquity for a woman vagina, or they call it vulva. So Botticelli made heavy use of gold in pigment, in the hair, in the wings, in the landscape. He uses gold foil, but he's doing this on canvas. So I'll show you a few details. So to remind you, this is The Birth of Venus. So I'm showing you this map here because Botticelli lived, he had for neighbor a German, he had for neighbor a gentleman called Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo Vespucci was an Italian explorer and a financier and a cartographer. And America is named after him, Amerigo Vespucci. And he is the first person to discover that the West Indies and Brazil were not part of Asia, but they were a separate continent. So you're looking at a map made by a German cartographer in 1507. So this cartographer and banker, the Vespucci, were very close to the Medici family, which would then become patrons of Botticelli. So this map is the first map that ever showed the America separated from Asia, and America got its name from this banker called Amerigo Vespucci. This is called Primavera. It means spring. Let me see, it measures 11 feet wide. It's at the Uffizi Gallery, very famous gallery in Florence. It's a tempera on wood panel. So, you know, a wood panel measuring 10 feet is a very, very heavy painting. So this painting is based on mythology. It's a celebration of spring and fertility. And it shows the four graces, Venus, Flora, Chloris, and Zephyrus. And the Pope in 1481 commissioned Botticelli to create art for the Sistine Chapel in Rome, which eventually Michelangelo is also going to work on fresco in the same church. So Botticelli gave up painting to become part of a religious sect, but he was saved from hunger from his friends and by the banker Lorenzo Medici. This is Venus. This is a detail of the same painting, Primavera. This is a painting, and you can see how the paintings are becoming more modern. That is from, you know, earlier painting I showed you of people like Uccello. This is Venus and Mars. It's a tempera on oil panel that measures 7 feet wide, and it's at the National Gallery in London.
Did they use a glaze?
Did they use glaze? They did use glaze. I don't know if in this painting they're using glaze, but yes, they use glaze, commonly use glaze, and a lot of glaze. This is a portrait of a woman called Simonetta Vespucci, 1480. So the gem on her neck was owned by Lorenzo de' Medici. They were the ruler of Florence. Simonetta Vespucci was nicknamed La Bella Simonetta, the beautiful Simonetta. She was an Indian noblewoman from Genoa. She was the wife of Marco Vespucci and the cousin-in-law of Amerigo Vespucci, who gave his name to America. She was known for her great beauty, and she was already the model for a lot of painters, which include Botticelli. And the last painting I will show you tonight, next week we'll go in full Renaissance mode. It's one of my favorites because it tells a story. This is called Despair, the Outcast. It's a tempera on wood panel. It measures 47 inches. So this is Despair by Botticelli. And this ends our lecture. Stop sharing.